The stars were burning when the Empress made her choice. Kale Morrow stood on the observation deck of the flagship Eternal Light, watching the battle unfold across 1,000 kilometers of space. Ships died in bright flashes of light. Whole crews vanished in seconds. The devouring swarm moved like a living storm, consuming everything in its path. Metal, flesh, energy, it did not matter. The swarm ate it all. He was just an engineer, a human engineer on an alien ship surrounded by species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Humans were new to space. They had only left their small blue planet 300 years ago. They were children compared to the ancient races of the Coalition. But the Empress had chosen him. Out of all her generals, all her admirals, all her advisors from 100 different species, she had given the task to a human. "You will guard the beacon," she had said, pressing the small device into his hands. It was warm, like holding a small sun. Symbols moved across its surface in patterns he could not understand. "When I return, humanity will have its place among the stars. This is my promise to your kind." They moved slowly, spoke carefully, and thought in terms of centuries rather than years. But the Empress was different. She burned with a fire that Kale had only seen in humans before. She made decisions quickly. She took risks. She cared about the small things, the lives of common soldiers, the fears of young pilots, the dreams of species that had not yet proved themselves. She cared about humans when no one else did. The Coalition had accepted humanity only because they needed bodies. The swarm was endless, and soldiers were dying faster than any species could replace them. Humans bred quickly. Humans were willing to fight. Humans were useful in the way that tools were useful. But the Empress saw something more. She visited human ships. She learned human names. She asked about Earth, about its blue oceans and green forests, about the way humans laughed and cried and loved. She said that humans reminded her of her own people long ago, before they became old and tired and afraid of change. "You have fire," she told Kale once. "The galaxy has forgotten what fire looks like, but I remember." Her personal ship was ready, a small vessel designed for speed rather than combat. She would fly into the heart of the swarm, into the rift that the monsters had torn through space itself. She would seal it from the inside, trapping the swarm and herself in a dimension between dimensions. It was a one-way journey. Everyone knew this. Kale found her in the hangar bay, standing alone beside her ship. The battle raged outside, but here it was quiet. Her silver skin glowed softly in the dim light. Her blue eyes were calm. "You should not be here," she said. "The battle." "You are strange, Kale Morrow. Your people live such short lives, yet you spend them caring about others. You have known me for only 5 years. That is nothing to my kind. But to you, it is everything. It is enough to know that you see us, really see us, when no one else does. And I will need you." Then she was gone, a streak of light flying toward the wound in space where the swarm poured through. Kale watched until she disappeared into the rift. He watched as the swarm began to slow, then stop, then collapse in on itself as the portal closed. He watched as the Coalition fleet cheered, as admirals embraced and soldiers wept with relief. The war was over. The swarm was gone. And the Empress was gone with it. The years that followed were not kind. Without the swarm to unite them, the Coalition began to fall apart. Old grudges returned. Ancient rivalries flared back to life. The Velithari, without their Empress, retreated into isolation. The other species fought over territory, over resources, over power. Humans were caught in the middle. They had no powerful friends, no ancient alliances, no fleets of their own. They had been soldiers, nothing more. Now that the war was over, the galaxy had no use for them. One by one, human colonies were taken. Human stations were destroyed. Human ships were hunted down and scrapped. Earth itself was blockaded, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Humans became refugees, scavengers, outcasts. They called humans many names: vermin, pests, stubborn animals that refused to die. The great species of the galaxy waited for humanity to simply fade away, to become another forgotten footnote in history. But Kale Morrow did not forget. He hid the beacon. He protected it with traps and secrets and lies. When his body began to fail, he found ways to extend his life. Forbidden technology. Dangerous technology. He replaced his organs with machines. He spread his mind across networks of computers. He became something that was not quite human anymore, but still remembered what it meant to be human. The centuries passed. Then the millennia. Other humans forgot the Empress. They forgot the promise. They forgot that once, long ago, humanity had fought beside the greatest coalition the galaxy had ever known. They only remembered the suffering, the loss, the endless struggle to survive. But Kale remembered. He sat alone in his hidden station, surrounded by the ghosts of a dead age, and he waited. The beacon pulsed softly in its chamber, still warm, still alive, still waiting for its master to return. 10,000 years. He had promised to wait. And Cale Morrow, the last true believer, intended to keep his promise. No matter how long it took, the station had no name anymore. Its original designation had been lost thousands of years ago, along with the empire that built it. Now it was just another piece of floating junk in a forgotten corner of space, orbiting a red star that would die in another billion years. No one came here. The star system had nothing of value, no habitable planets, no rare minerals, no strategic importance. It was the perfect place to hide. Cale Morrow had not seen his own reflection in over 3,000 years. He had stopped looking after the last of his original skin had been replaced. Now he existed as something between man and machine. His consciousness lived in a network of old computers scattered throughout the station. His body, such as it was, sat in a chair in the central chamber, a framework of metal and wire wrapped around organs that had been grown in tanks and replaced hundreds of times. He could see through the cameras. He could move through the maintenance drones. He could feel the station around him like a second skin, sensing every crack in the walls, every flicker in the power grid, every grain of dust that floated through the empty corridors. He was alone. He had been alone for a very long time. Sometimes he wondered if he was still sane. Sanity was a human concept, and he was not sure how human he still was, but he remembered the Empress. He remembered her promise. He remembered why he was here. The beacon sat in its chamber at the heart of the station, surrounded by layers of protection that Cale had built over the millennia, force fields, automated weapons. Traps that would destroy the entire station rather than let the beacon fall into the wrong hands. It still pulsed with that soft, warm light, still moved with those strange symbols, still waited. Cale waited with it. The alarm came in the middle of what Cale thought of as night. A ship had entered the system. Small, old, barely holding together. A human ship. He watched through the long-range sensors as it limped toward the station. It was a scavenger vessel, the kind that humans used these days to pick through the ruins of dead civilizations. Cale had seen many of them over the years. Usually they passed by without noticing the station. The camouflage systems were good, but this one was different. This one was heading straight for him. Cale activated the defense systems, then paused. The ship was too small to be a real threat, and it had been so long since he had spoken to another human, he let it land. The girl who stepped out of the ship was young, 18, perhaps 20 years old. She had dark skin and darker eyes, and she moved with the careful watchfulness of someone who had learned early that the universe was not a friendly place. She wore patched clothes and carried a weapon that looked like it had been assembled from 3 different guns. She looked around the landing bay with suspicion. "Hello," she called out. "I know someone is here. I tracked your power signature for 3 days. My ship needs parts, my crew needs food, we have nothing left." She did not lower her gun. "You have power here, you have supplies, I can see it in the energy readings. Share with us and we will leave." "They said we were vermin. I will give you food and parts, but first there is something I want to show you." Cale led her through the station to the central chamber. She stopped when she saw his body in the chair. "What happened to you?" she whispered. "Time," Cale said. "Time happened to me." When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You are insane. You have been waiting for nothing." "Because someone had to," he finally said. "Because if everyone gives up, then nothing matters. Because the Empress believed in us when no one else did, and I will not let that belief die, even if I am the only one who remembers." "You are insane," she said again, "but maybe that is what we need." A tone rising and falling like a heartbeat. Cale had not heard that sound in 10,000 years, but he recognized it immediately. It was an answer. Something was coming through the rift. He called Sira to the chamber. She stood beside him, watching the beacon pulse and glow. "What does it mean?" she asked. Cale felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope, pure, burning hope. "It means she is coming," he said. "It means the Empress is coming home." Cale watched through the station's sensors as reality itself tore apart, revealing a darkness that hurt to look at. Energy poured out in waves that made the station shake. Warning alarms screamed throughout every corridor. Sira grabbed onto a support beam and held tight. Then a ship emerged. It was not the small, fast vessel that the Empress had flown into the rift 10,000 years ago. It was a warship massive and ancient, covered in scars and burns from battles beyond counting. Parts of its hull were missing. Fires burned in sections that still had air. It moved slowly, painfully, like a wounded animal crawling home. But it was Velithari design. There was no mistaking those elegant curves, that silver metal, those flowing lines that seemed to dance even when standing still. The rift closed behind it. The ship drifted toward the station. "She is hailing us," Kale said. His voice was shaking. He could not remember the last time his voice had shaken. He opened the channel. The image that appeared was the Empress, but changed. Her silver skin was darker now, marked with lines that might have been scars or might have been something else entirely. Her blue eyes still glowed, but the light was dimmer, tired. She looked older, though her kind did not age the way humans did. She looked like someone who had been fighting for a very long time. "This is the Empress Kalithra of the Velithari Dominion," she said. "Requesting permission to dock, we need." She paused, and for a moment the ancient weight of exhaustion showed on her face. "We need help. 10,000 years." There was nothing he could say. "What has happened?" the Empress asked. "Where are my fleets? Why does no one answer my calls?" "And humanity," she laughed bitterly. "Humanity was thrown out with the garbage." The other species started fighting over territory. Humans had no one to protect them. We were weak, we were few, and we had nothing anyone wanted except our ability to work and die. So they used us until they did not need us anymore. Then they pushed us out, took our colonies, destroyed our ships, drove us back to Earth, and then blockaded it so we could not leave. He is the only reason I even know your name. Everyone else has forgotten. The Empress is just a fairy tale now, a story about an alien queen who loved humans for some reason no one can explain. Nobody believes she was real. Nobody believes she is coming back. I saved the galaxy from the swarm, and in return I lost everything. Both broken, both stubborn, both still here. The beacon, she said, you kept it safe. Light poured out, filling the chamber, dancing across the walls in patterns that seemed to contain meaning. Kale watched as the device unfolded like a flower, revealing layer after layer of hidden technology. "I never knew what it was for," he admitted. "I only knew I had to protect it. My inheritance for the species that showed me what fire looked like." She gestured at the unfolding device. "Everything is here. Star maps of hidden resources, designs for ships and weapons, shield frequencies that will let you pass through any defense, the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations gathered over millions of years. Everything humanity would need to rise from nothing and take its place among the stars. I did not know how much you would suffer, but I never stopped believing that one day I would return and humanity would be ready to claim its inheritance. If they find out about this, they will come and destroy us. Then we are dead. There is no way we can prepare in days. I knew humanity would need to be ready." He sent commands through the station, and all around them hidden panels began to open. Weapons emerged from the walls. Power systems hummed to life. "I have been building defenses for millennia. I have been making alliances with other forgotten species. I have been preparing for this exact moment. Kale Morrow, you truly are remarkable. Tell every human who can hear it that the beacon is lit. Tell them their Empress has returned." Humanity rises. Now they would see if anyone was still listening. They came on the third day. The first ships appeared at the edge of the system, a Korvathi battle fleet, sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons that could crack moons in half. Behind them came the Threll with their swarm carriers full of drone fighters. Behind them came the Velanthi Syndicate, mercenaries who worked for whoever paid the most. And behind them all, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation, came a fleet of Velithari warships. Not the Empress's forces. These were loyalists to the new order, commanders who had risen in the power vacuum left by her departure. They had ruled for 10,000 years. They were not about to give up their thrones. Kale counted the ships as they arrived. 200, 300, 500. The numbers kept climbing. "Over 1,000 warships," Sira said quietly. She stood on the station's command deck watching the tactical display. "We have 47. Ships had come from everywhere. Battered freighters armed with jury-rigged weapons, ancient cruisers held together by hope and wire, small fighters that should have been scrapped centuries ago. They had all come, because for the first time in 10,000 years, someone had given them something to fight for. 47 ships, against more than 1,000. "We are going to die," one of the human captains said over the communication channel. His name was Marcus, and he commanded an old transport ship with 3 working guns. "Probably," Sira agreed. "But we are going to die fighting." Her own ship was barely functional, but she had transferred to the station to help coordinate the defense. "They expect us to run," she said. "They expect us to beg for mercy. They do not know humans very well." "You survive. You refuse to stay down when you should die." The Empress smiled grimly. "Today we show them why they were right to be afraid. Destroy this station and scatter back to your holes. Do this, and we will allow the rest of you to live. You cannot win this battle. You have no fleet. You have no allies. You have nothing." It was a formation designed to crush opposition through sheer overwhelming force. Against any normal enemy, it would have worked perfectly. But Kale had spent 10,000 years preparing for this moment. The station's hidden weapons came online. Ancient cannons, built from designs that predated the coalition itself, fired beams of concentrated energy that cut through shields like paper. Mines that had been sleeping in the asteroid field for millennia woke up and tore into the enemy flanks. Defense platforms that everyone had thought were dead rock suddenly revealed themselves as weapons platforms and added their fire to the storm. The enemy fleet reeled. 30 ships died in the first minute, but there were still hundreds more. "All human ships, attack," Sira commanded. "Don't try to match them strength to strength. Hit them where they're weak and run before they can respond. Make them chase you. Make them bleed for every inch of space." A freighter would fire its 3 guns at a warship's engines, then dive behind an asteroid before the return fire could find it. A fighter would ram itself into a carrier's shield generator, the pilot ejecting at the last second. A transport ship would broadcast false signals, making the enemy think it was a battleship, drawing fire away from the real threats. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was completely unpredictable, and it was working. The enemy could not adapt. Their formations were designed for organized warfare for fleets that followed rules and fought fair. Humans did not follow rules. Humans did not fight fair. Humans fought to win, and if winning meant dying in the process, then they would make sure their deaths cost the enemy dearly. Marcus and his old transport ship destroyed a Threll carrier by flying directly into its hangar bay and detonating the ship's reactor. 20 human lives for a carrier with thousands of drone fighters. It was not a fair trade. It was a human trade. A group of fighters lured a Velithari cruiser into the asteroid field, where hidden mines tore it apart. A refugee ship, knowing it was doomed, set a collision course with the enemy flagship, forcing it to break formation to avoid impact. The station itself became a weapon. Kale threw everything he had at the enemy, weapons he had built over millennia, traps he had prepared for this exact moment, tricks that even the Empress had not known about. At one point, he vented the station's atmosphere directly at an attacking squadron, using the explosive decompression to throw debris into their path. Hours passed. Ships died on both sides, but more enemy ships died than human ones. The 1,000-ship fleet became 900, then 800, then 700. Admiral Vithrin was screaming at his commanders. "They are vermin. They have nothing. Why can you not destroy them?" And more, humans who had hidden in the darkness of space for generations emerged to fight. Humans who had sworn they would never risk their lives again found themselves unable to stay away. Humans who had nothing left to lose realized they finally had something worth fighting for. The 47 ships became 50, then 60, then 100. And then, impossibly, ships that were not human began to appear. The forgotten, species that the great powers had crushed and scattered just as they had crushed humanity. The Gendari, whose homeworld had been stripped of resources. The Velic, whose people had been enslaved for centuries. The Sorn, who had been hunted nearly to extinction. They had heard the signal, too. They had seen humanity stand against impossible odds, and they had decided that if the stubborn vermin could fight, then so could they. The enemy fleet, which had expected an easy victory, found itself facing an alliance it had not predicted. Not a great coalition like the one that had defeated the Swarm, but something new. Something born from desperation and spite and the absolute refusal to lie down and die. The battle turned. Then it broke. Admiral Vithrin's flagship exploded as 3 human ships and 2 Gendari cruisers concentrated their fire on it. Without their leader, the enemy fleet began to fracture. Some ships retreated. Others surrendered. Others kept fighting but lost all coordination. By the time the sun set on the station's artificial day cycle, it was over. The enemy fleet was gone, scattered, or destroyed. The station was damaged but intact. The human fleet had lost many ships, many lives, but they had won. Sira stood on the command deck, looking at the wreckage floating in space. She was exhausted, bruised, covered in blood from a wound she did not remember getting. But she was alive. They were all alive. The Empress placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," she said. "You showed the galaxy what humans can do. This is a victory for everyone they tried to throw away. Now we show them that this was just the beginning." The envoys came 3 days after the battle. They arrived in ships marked with the symbols of a dozen different species, ambassadors from the Velithari Council, representatives from the Korvathi Empire, delegates from the Threll Collective and the Velanthi Syndicate, and a dozen other powers that had spent millennia treating humanity like dirt beneath their feet. Now they came to negotiate. The meeting took place in the station's largest hall, a chamber that Kale had kept intact for exactly this purpose. The Empress sat at the head of a long table, with Sira at her right hand and Kale's primary drone floating at her left. Across from them sat the envoys, their faces carefully neutral, their eyes betraying fear. The lead envoy was a Velithari named Cithrin, one of the council members who had ruled in the Empress's absence. His silver skin was pale, and his blue eyes kept darting toward his former sovereign with barely hidden terror. "The council recognizes the Empress's return," he began, his voice steady despite his obvious discomfort. "We are prepared to discuss terms for reconciliation. You took everything from us, our worlds, our ships, our future. You tried to kill us so slowly that no one would notice or care." She leaned forward. "We noticed, we cared. We are prepared to offer concessions," another envoy said, a Korvathi with nervous hands. "Territory, resources, reparations. We can restore humanity to. You think you can pay for what you did and everything will return to normal?" She shook her head slowly. "Nothing will ever be normal again. The galaxy has changed, and you cannot buy your way back to the old order." "I did not return to reclaim my throne," she said. "I returned to keep a promise. I promised humanity a place among the stars. I promised them equality, respect, and a seat at the table of galactic power. That promise was broken the moment I entered the rift. For 10,000 years, the species I trusted betrayed the ones I loved." The young human looked up at her, uncertain. "Stand," the Empress said. Sira stood. "I am old," the Empress said. "Older than you can imagine. I have ruled empires, led wars, shaped the fate of galaxies. But even I cannot live forever. Even I cannot protect humanity eternally." She placed her hands on Sira's shoulders. "So I will do something better. I will give humanity the power to protect itself. To lead a new coalition, one built not on convenience but on trust, not on fear but on loyalty. You sent 1,000 warships against a handful of refugees and they broke your fleet. They were outnumbered 20-1 and they won. Not because they had better weapons, not because they had more ships, because they had something you lost a long time ago, the willingness to die for something greater than themselves. It cannot be conquered. It cannot be destroyed. Every species that tried to crush humanity only made them stronger. Every time you pushed them down, they got back up. Every time you said they were vermin, they proved you wrong. They will build ships and weapons equal to any in the galaxy, and they will have a seat at every table where decisions are made. Accept it or we can have another battle. I am sure the humans would not mind." The beacon was fully open now, all its secrets revealed, all its knowledge flowing into human databanks. Already engineers were studying the designs. Already shipyards were being planned. In a year, humanity would have its first true warship. In 10 years, they would have a fleet. In 100 years, they would be a power that no one could ignore. But Sira was not thinking about the future. She was looking at Kale. His drone floated near the chair where his body sat, that strange mixture of metal and flesh that had kept him alive for 10 millennia, but something was different now. The lights on his systems were dimming. The hum of his processors was fading. "You are dying," Sira said. "Yes." Kale's voice was weak but calm. "I have been dying for a very long time. I just kept putting it off, but now—" He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something like peace in his voice. "Now I do not have to wait anymore. I cannot imagine what that cost you. Because you saw something in humanity that no one else saw. Because when everyone else treated us as tools to be used and discarded, you treated us as equals." His voice grew softer. "How could I give up on that? How could I let that die? You are the most human person I have ever known." And he had never given up. "Thank you," she said. It felt insufficient, but it was all she had. Kale's sensors focused on her. "Do not thank me, just remember me. Remember that someone waited. Remember that hope is worth holding on to, even when it seems foolish. Remember that humans do not give up." The lights on his systems flickered one last time. Then my work is done. Outside, rising from the station's construction bay, was a ship. The first ship built from the beacon's designs, completed in just 3 days by engineers working without sleep, driven by a desperate need to prove that the future was real. It was not large, it was not beautiful, but it was theirs. "What will you name it?" the Empress asked. Sira thought of Kale. She thought of his patience, his stubbornness, his absolute refusal to let hope die. She thought of all the years he had spent alone in the dark, waiting for a tomorrow that might never come. "We will call it Kale's Promise," she said. The ship rose into the stars. Years passed. The galaxy changed. New alliances formed. Old empires crumbled. Humanity spread across the stars, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. They built cities on worlds that had once been denied to them. They stood as equals in councils where their voices had once been silenced. They became what the Empress had always known they could be, a light in the darkness. Sira became old. She led the new coalition through crises and triumphs, through wars and peace, through everything the universe could throw at them. She married. She had children. She watched her grandchildren grow up in a galaxy where being human was something to be proud of. And on the day she finally stepped down from leadership, she gave a speech. It was broadcast across every human world, every ship, every station. "We are here," she said, "because one man believed in us when no one else did. We are here because he waited when waiting was madness. He fought when fighting was suicide. He hoped when hope was foolish. Because when the universe tells us to lie down and die, we look it in the eye and say no." And in the records of history, in every library and archive across the galaxy, a single line was preserved, the words of a man who had waited 10,000 years for a promise to be kept. "I told you I would wait." He had waited, and because he had, humanity lived. The stars remembered, and they always would.